Cupping has been an alternative form of medicine for over 2,000 years and has recently been more popularized by athletes as an additional form of physical therapy to help with recovery and mobility. AchedAway have brought the practice up to the modern age, bringing the AchedAway Smart Massage Cupper into the market, and I've luckily had the chance to try it out to once again give you guys the lowdown on my personal opinions of its effectiveness. Yes, this is a sponsored video, and no, I'm not obliged to say anything nice about the product, so these opinions are 100% my own. And yes, I did want to try the product out as someone who's perpetually injured and looking for any sort of relief for the aches and pains that just generally come with climbing. So jumping right into it, the AchedAway Smart Cupper does come with everything that you'll need right out of the box, with 3 varying size plastic cups, a lanyard to stop the cupper from falling, of course the actual cupper itself, some replacement filters for hygiene purposes, and a quick start manual. The cupping therapy can be tailored to individual preferences with 5 cupping modes, an intensity control, and a red light mode. For finer control and a more visual interface, I do recommend the app as it just makes things a lot easier to control with a built-in timer functionality to turn off after a specific time as well. Now, I will start off with a critique right off the bat in that I wish I had more cup sizing options. As a climber, shoulders and back are of course going to take some punishment, and the sizing options available are perfectly suited for those specific areas. However, I found that the smallest of the cups did struggle a bit to fit nicely on the forearms, though they did manage at a higher mode and intensity to create a stronger vacuum. But more specifically, I would have loved to have tried this more around the wrist and around the hand, but since the cups are made from a hardened plastic material, they just won't end up molding around the areas, which means that they just need to be the perfect size. The hardened plastic isn't very comfortable on the skin either, though I never really buy these things for comfort but more effectiveness, though it doesn't stop me from wanting a rubber or silicone lining just to soften where the cup attaches to the skin to stop the edges from kind of digging in. Now, regarding the effectiveness, I am still a little bit torn. After a single use all over my back, I still had some relative stiffness in the lower section, though it did feel pretty good while it was on it. I'd liken it to a pretty solid massage, but obviously this adds some autonomy, so it doesn't need that applied force by me or another person, which honestly is always a plus. I've also recently developed some tendonitis in the rotator cuff of my right shoulder, and I was really hoping that it would get some mobility back, but on my first attempt, it had no noticeable differences. However, in saying that, I did try again just before this video in a different spot with a deltoid tricep and bicep overlap instead of just over the delts, so you can still see the marks there, so at a lower section instead of up here and around the back and around the pec area. And I did find that I did gain about 10% mobility back and a reduction of about the same amount in terms of pain after about 2 minutes of use at a medium setting, which honestly just tells me that initially I just targeted the wrong areas. And we'll put that away before the ladies get a little too excited. Using it around the forearms, I did notice more flexibility around the wrist after my session, which for me was the biggest improvement using the cupper. A second use of it probably would have dealt with the lower back stiffness, or like my shoulder, maybe it was just in the wrong location. But at that point, I was already covered in perfectly rounded hickeys, and I really didn't want to overdo it. The cupper also includes a red light, which in theory helps stimulate the mitochondria in the cells to function more efficiently and increase its healing factor. While there are studies that have shown positive results regarding red light therapy, it is still in contention within the medical field of its overall effectiveness. Personally, since it's difficult to measure the effectiveness of red light therapy on myself in a more scientific manner, the feature is more of a nice to have since it really couldn't hurt. When it comes to alternative therapies, I'm generally more on the skepticism side and prefer scientific backed studies, or at the very least have a scientifically backed theoretical approach. But after 8 months of pain in my ring finger after a climbing injury and becoming desperate, I ended up trying dry needling with a myotherapist only for the pain to finally clear up. So I'm much more open to different forms of therapy that can help me with my destructive climbing habits, i.e. always limit climbing and never actually training or doing more than 5 minutes of warm-up. So in saying that, the idea behind cupping is that through myofascial decompression, the connective tissues of your muscles, tendons, and ligaments essentially are pulled up and stretched, making room for your muscles to move and release the tightness you generally feel from knots. It's a different form of treatment to regular massaging, as the idea behind cupping isn't to move and untangle muscle knots, but to make enough space for them to loosen up, increasing mobility and facilitating more circulation around the area to promote more healing. There's a really good video lecture from the University of California that explains it in more detail, which I'll throw down in the description below, But in the end, it's really about how effective it is and the overall pros and cons. On the pro side, there have been studies that have shown the effectiveness of cupping and not just a reliance on anecdotal evidence. While still controversial, I have had cupping done before by my myotherapist, and it has helped me release my tight muscles in the past, and there are plenty of professional athletes who swear by it. On the negative side, big splotchy circles all over your body for about a week or two. But if you can get over that, cupping is definitely something that you should try out if you frequently find yourself tight from training. Everyone responds to different treatments differently, so experimentation in the recovery field is something that I actually do endorse quite heavily. Now, in regards to the AchedAway Smart Cupper, I really like that it's really simple to use, basically just a one touch and go button. And also, I like the fact that it systematically goes from suction to release to create more of a massage-like sensation, which is supposed to help circulation and speed up the recovery process. The power of the suction at max is pretty full on as well. I don't think anyone, at least in their right mind, would need any more suction power than what's provided here. Maybe your mum, but that's a different story. But seriously, the suction is strong enough that I actually panicked a few times and turned it off early and put it on a lower setting because it really is pretty scary. The included lanyard is nice as well. It's a small detail, but I never really would have thought about it, and it would have ended up dropping to the ground after turning it off if it hadn't been included in the kit. Personally, I think that it's a great additional tool to have since it treats muscle tightness and soreness in a different kind of way instead of just relying on compression type of treatments. That being said, I'd probably only use it once every couple of weeks as an additional form of self-management alongside regular treatments to my myotherapist and my massage gun. I do wish it came with a carry case since I've wanted to bring it along to the gym a few times for others to try out, and while it's super convenient to carry along because of its size, in my bag it would just end up banging around, which is kind of worrisome since the cups are plastic and the actual cupper is electronic. Now, the biggest negative I find with the cupper itself isn't really with the product, but more of a lack of information on the practice of cupping. Like with any tool, there is that possibility of abusing it or using it in the wrong way, so there is that possibility of injury if you don't really know what you're doing. And again, this is my biggest issue because I really didn't know what I was doing. I ended up placing the cupper in areas where I was just sore and just anywhere I could attach it on my back. It was like playing pin the cup on the bale. There wasn't any included information on the locations to best place them, where to avoid, how long to leave them on for, how often to do it, or what pressure to go with. It does come with a guide, but it's more of a how to operate the actual cupper more than the actual treatment advice and best practices. And just to cover myself here, there is a section in the FAQ that tells you that it's suggested to cup for about 3 to 12 minutes per spot, but that range is extremely large for something where it's suctioning this intensely. I ended up doing more research than I intended because, like I said, this isn't something that I'm personally experienced in. For a quick rundown, I generally stayed within the 3-minute mark. Some people suggested cupping twice a week, others only when the cupping marks have vanished, and I really just threw them on wherever there was still a blank spot on my back. I did ask my myotherapist prior how best to use it, where she explained that rather than taking a passive approach to the treatment, it's best to place the cup around the joints and actually go through the range of motion to help stretch out those areas. So at the very least, I did have some expert advice on the matter before going in. Now, the tough question to answer is, would I recommend it? Of course, buy it. It's fantastic. It's magic. Use my link down in the description below. Is what I'd say if I was just trying to get some affiliate money out of this. But I do have 3 differing opinions here. I think for a physical therapist who uses cupping as part of their treatment for their clients, it's a fantastic product to have, again with all the features that are included, alongside the app which is able to connect to 6 cuppers at a time. For athletes, I think it's useful to have, but again alongside other treatments and only if you have the necessary knowledge of where and how to use it. So for us climbers, I think this is where essentially most of us would sit. So before using it, I would ask your physical therapist to walk you through it to avoid unnecessary injuries to yourself. But again, at a $200 price tag, I do think that climbers who are more experienced and tend to go harder would benefit from this way more than a casual gym goer. And for the general public with sore backs and stiff necks from sitting at a computer desk all day or lifting heavy objects, honestly, I'd say just go see a myotherapist at that point, unless you have the cash to blow and really just want that convenience of managing at home. But even then, I would still bring it to an expert to walk you through best practices. For me, I would 100% use it more if it didn't leave me looking like Brown Polka Dot Man from Suicide Squad for 2 weeks. So for now, it's really more of a use when things are getting really bad kind of situation. And honestly, I'm thankful for AchedAway for sending me the product to give it a fair and honest review. And like I said, I am glad that I'm able to use this for those desperate times. If you are keen on trying the AchedAway Smart Cuppa, that link is in the description below. And if you are an avid cuppa supporter, do let us know what your experience has been with cupping as a whole and how effective it was for you. This is the one and only Bayorong. As always, remember to send rocks, not nudes. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you legends next time.